Proyecto dedicado a la divulgación, formación y terapia psicológica. Consulta nuestros servicios en nuestra web y redes sociales.
Long before language appeared and have no...
So language emerged when, do you suppose? Could we talk maybe a little about the evolution of language and what your views on that are?
We now have some evidence on that. It's a hard problem, but the basic story is this. There's good evidence now that modern humans appeared roughly 200 to 300,000 years ago. There's now genomic evidence, solid genomic evidence, that shows that humans began to separate not very long after that, maybe on the order of 150,000 years or so. In evolutionary time, that's nothing. So, and the groups that separated all have the faculty of language, same faculty of language, which means it must have been in place before the separation. Well, furthermore, if you look at the archaeological record, paleontological record, there's no evidence, virtually no evidence of any symbolic activity before the emergence of modern humans. You get some marks and shells and stuff, but basically nothing. After the emergence of humans, you pretty quickly get very complex symbolic activity and complex societies and so on. Put all this together, it looks as though the language capacity developed pretty much along with modern humans. It must have been some slight rewiring of the brain that gave the basic property of language, which is the property of recursive enumeration of a digital infinity of structured expressions. Could be a very small...
Actually, going from 1 to 2 is a pretty big step all by itself before you get to recursiveness. I've been involved with on and off with a strange group called the Language Origin Society. That's where I met that Belgian linguist. What I found curious was that among this group of people, and they included linguists and anthropologists and psychologists and people from all sorts of disciplines. The guy who founded it was an ear, nose, and throat doctor who was interested in how much we could say about what Neanderthals sounded like based on what we knew of the anatomy. But one of the consistent things was a debate with some people saying human language was a couple of million years old. And their basis for saying that was the evidence of chipped stones and fire and habitations that were all within earshot of each other. And then there was another group that was saying it was essentially 100,000 to 50,000 years old, which was mainly folks with much more linguistic backgrounds. And one of the things that couldn't have been happening over those couple of million years was any kind of multiple word utterances. Because we know that primates have various kinds of sounds that they make that do essentially command behavior on the part of other members of the troop. Gorillas make certain sounds that will, and some of them will single out another individual gorilla to change its behavior. But somewhere more recently came the possibility of combining 2 or more words where the 2 words had different functions. And that sort of makes me think of things like the Cambrian revolution, where once you had multi-celled organisms come together, you had an explosion of diversity. And there you have...
If you look at this field, there's all kinds of what evolutionary biologists call just so stories. Maybe that may be the other thing. But there's also evidence. The evidence is what I just described. The language faculty was apparently in place before the separation of the small group of Homo sapiens. That would put it not long after the appearance of modern humans. Before the existence of modern humans, there's basically nothing in the archaeological record that indicates any symbolic activity. You do get a series of chips. There's new work by Stan Dehane at the Paris and his group showing that 500,000 or 600,000 years ago, that's well before language, you start getting geometrical configurations. So humans began constructing geometrical objects and, in fact, organizing them in terms of simplicity of organization. But that may be something.
Oh yeah, you can't tell anybody how to chip one of those things. The only way you could do it is to show them how to do it. I mean, just like trying to teach somebody to tie shoelaces by only talking to them, it would be very hard to do. So yeah, I wasn't suggesting
I understand.
that
it's possible that this is some deep precursor of language, but it doesn't get you to recursive enumeration of a digitally infinite set. That's the crucial thing that's part of language. You don't find it anywhere else. And it's not a matter of going from 2 to 3. This is actually something that Darwin and Wallace were puzzled by. They wondered how it could be that humans, they assumed, all have arithmetical capacity. The knowledge that the numbers go on forever, that you can add and multiply. They didn't know that, but they assumed it correctly, it turns out. And they asked, how could this be, since there was never any selection for language, since it was never used. They had a long debate about this. Well, we now have some hint as to what it might be. It's possible that the kind of the elementary operations that yield recursive enumeration, if they're simple enough, give the fundamentals of arithmetic. So it may be that the same neural change, small neural change that yielded the faculty of language also yielded the mathematical faculty. Dehaene's results suggest that even something earlier might have split off to give other kinds of capacity to deal with structures. But there's nothing in Dehaene's work that shows any evidence of recursive enumeration. And also he shows that different parts of the brain are involved, not the parts that are involved in language faculty. So there are bits and pieces of evidence accumulating as to what might have happened, but I think we should dismiss the stories that are produced about what might have happened, yet anything might have happened.
But language had to have some kind of function for it to have,
Gracias por ver este vídeo, os dejamos por aquí un enlace a nuestra última formación y por aquí algunos vídeos que os pueden resultar de interés. Si estáis buscando ayuda psicológica, también podéis mirar en la descripción del vídeo, donde encontraréis nuestra web y podréis solicitar asistencia terapéutica de un profesional confiable y que os ofrecerá ayuda psicológica basada en evidencia científica.